He is the CEO of the TNT Energy Chamber. So who else to tell us more about energy than Dr. Driver himself? So, Dr. Driver, thank you and welcome once again, and Happy New Year to you once again, and welcome to GMTT for 2017. It's the first time for the year. So.
First time for the year. I'm sure it won't be the last time.
Of course not. So tell us, what's been happening basically with the energy sector and energy prices as it affects Trinidad and Tobago thus far?
Well, I mean, 2016 was a very, very difficult year for the country's energy sector. We had, a very low price environment. Oil prices got a little bit better towards the end of the year, but the structural factors which push down oil prices still exist, and that's really the change in technology and the advent of shale oil and shale gas in the USA, and that is not going away. They have shown themselves able to reduce their cost base, so they're able to bring new production in, so that's always going to act as a cap to prices. So I don't think expecting to see prices really shoot up tremendously. We may see some modest increases, but not a massive increase. And gas prices are also low. Gone up a little bit in the US, but globally gas prices are down much below the levels of a couple of years ago. So that really means all of our commodities fetch a lot less on the international markets than they did two years ago. But the bigger issue for Trinidad is that our production has been falling and continues to fall. Because we can't control prices. Those are just set by the international market. We've got to take the prices which are given. But we can control production. And so the issue for Trinidad is how do we get the policy environment right, where we can stop the decline in production and turn it around and actually start to increase both gas production and oil production.
So how do we do that? What can we do to really stop that and get it going?
Sure. So the key to increasing oil and gas production is investment. You have to have capital investment being spent, drilling new wells, putting new facilities in place, putting infrastructure in place. If you do not have that capital investment flowing, your production will inevitably decline. It's a naturally declining resource. If you don't have new wells coming in, your production is always going to be declining. So the big thing that you're looking for is a level of capital investment coming into the energy sector. So you have to create the right environment that the capital is going to be invested in the energy sector. If you don't do that, then your production will decline, and then the country's revenue will decline, and we'll be in all sorts of trouble, as we are at the moment.
With the looming strike action coming with OWTU, they said that they intend to. They haven't said that, yes, they're going to, but the country is expecting it to happen. How does that affect, with that strike action that's going to be taking place over the next couple months or so, how is that going to affect what's happening in the country with production?
Obviously it's going to affect the country very severely. It's going to affect the oil company, Petrotrin, severely. It's going to have a major impact on them. Obviously their efforts will all go into trying to ensure that fuel is available to keep people moving. And there's contingency plans around that, and you can do that. But while that's going on, and all the efforts done on making sure that people have fuel still, all the real hard structural stuff, all the investment has to happen. The danger is that it all gets delayed and doesn't happen, and that is really just very bad for the long-term future of Petrotrin. It has very large debt obligations it has to meet. Because it's a state-owned company, those are tied to the country's debt rating. So the international rating agencies will look at the ability of Petrotrin to repay the loans. If they think there's question marks about that, that puts additional debt burden onto all of the citizens of the country, and creates a danger of us being downgraded in terms of our rating agency, which means borrowing becomes more expensive. So in a situation where the Minister of Finance is having to borrow to keep the country, keep expenditure from the government going, that puts more cost on us. So it's a sort of a downward spiral. So I think that is a major a factor that the country has to consider, not just the fuel, but also what it means for our debt. The other part of that is Forex, major issue for everybody in the country, accessing foreign exchange. Petrotrin is a major generator of foreign exchange, but is also a major user of foreign exchange. It has to buy crude oil on the international markets. Obviously, the more oil it can produce itself from its own acreage, from its own oil fields, means the less crude it has to buy internationally to put through the refinery. So obviously, for the country as well, increasing domestic crude production has a big impact on the availability of foreign exchange. Now, if we're having to buy fuel internationally because we're not producing in our refinery, that is also a negative on our foreign exchange situation. So it has these much wider implications beyond just driving and moving people around.
You know, and as you mentioned foreign exchange as well, I think just heard recently from RBC that they're also going to initiate, because initially it wasn't like that, a lit on their credit card transactions as well, international credit cards. You're also going to initiate a limit on that. So we see that this Forex situation is not really changing very much. And as you said with Petrotrin, what's happening with Petrotrin, it can do even more damage in the event that, you know, the strike does go through and they're not producing as much as they should produce. What can you say about the agreement that was signed quite recently with Venezuela, that the Prime Minister signed quite recently with Venezuela?
Well, it's a historic agreement. It's very important for the country that we get access to gas from Venezuela. We have severe gas shortages affecting Point Lisas and the Atlantic facility. So, you know, those are running far below capacity. So that is, again, foreign exchange which the country could be earning, which we are not earning because we do not have the gas available to put in to Point Lisas and Atlantic. So getting an alternative source of gas from Venezuela is very important. That agreement was the government-to-government agreement. There is an agreement which sort of rests under that, which is the company-to-company agreement about exactly how the project is going to be implemented and you know, exactly who's going to pay for what and where the capital investment is going to be. All that is still being negotiated. So it's still a little while off until actually see gas flowing to Trinidad. But nevertheless, this was a very significant agreement to be signed because historically Venezuela has been very, not very keen on exporting gas, unrefined gas. It's always wanted to develop its own industries like we have in Point Lisas or like Atlantic and export the gas itself. It doesn't want to sort of send gas in a pipeline. It has done a little bit with Colombia in the past, and at the moment they're still exporting some gas to Colombia. But this was a historic agreement for gas to be sent to Trinidad, to be processed here, to be exported. So that was a big change, and so it was an important agreement. But it was a big hurdle to clear, but there's still other hurdles before the actual gas flows to Trinidad.
Yeah, because I know that they have to build the line as that's one of the major things.
And that stuff, you know, from an engineering point of view, it's not a difficult project. But from getting the right legal and commercial agreements in place, that's where the challenge is.
Okay. There's an energy conference that's coming up later on this month, is it?
That's our conference, 23rd, 24th, 25th of January. It's the biggest annual energy conference, which we hold every year. We have some really great international speakers coming in to that, and it's the time when the industry really gets together, exchanges views about what's happening, tries to set the agenda for the year, hears from the government about what the government plans are, gets the industry a chance to respond and say what it thinks the priorities need to be, and everybody in the industry to understand what each other is doing so people can plan their businesses for the year.
Okay. What guests are you going to be having for this conference? I assume you would be having guests.
Sure. So we have some of the senior leadership from the international oil and gas companies who will be here, and Bernard Looney, who is the CEO of BP Global for the upstream, that's that oil and gas production side, will be here, and we have some other some other big international speakers who will be in here. And we have a good panel on Guyana and Suriname as well, companies from Guyana and Suriname who are the oil producers there. We have this big oil find from Exxon, so Exxon will be at the conference talking about what's happening in Guyana, and Statoil from Suriname will be here as well.
Where's it taking place?
At the Hyatt Hotel.
Okay, and that's towards the end of the month, is the...
Yeah, 23rd and 24th of January.
Okay. From what time till? And
well,
who's
it's an all-day event. Everyone can come. I mean, people you can register through our website, energy.tt, and follow the links from there. And so it's open to everybody. Tends to be people from the oil and gas industry globally and nationally who attend. Service companies who service the industry. Tends to be those sort of companies who are there. And other stakeholders, really, governmental people tend to attend as well.
I'm interested to find out. I know you're going to be talking energy issues, energy matters that relate to the country, regionally and internationally as well. And I'm sure you would want some sort of governmental input into that.
Sure.
How much would you say that the government actually listens to what you have to say to move forward, as opposed to you having to adjust your plans depending on what the government does?
No, I think there's really very much a dialogue always with the government. There's a constant ongoing dialogue between the industry and the government. You know, it's not that the industry demands things of the government and gets them, it's that there's always a dialogue because there's competing different interests, people want things slightly different ways, different ideas, so there always has to be that dialogue. But what's important is everyone pulls in the same direction. And the big issue we have to pull towards is how do we get this investment into Trinidad's upstream so to make sure that we create a future for Point Lisas and for Atlantic. Because if we don't, you're talking about a very different sort of future, which is a future of closing down the industry. Obviously, that's not what we want. We want to have a future for Point Lisas and a future for Atlantic. That means having gas available to run those industries. That means having the investment dollars going into the upstream. So that has to be the focus.
What do you think about the call for diversifying from the energy sector? There's always been that because with the decline that's going on with gas, and then other countries are getting into it as well, so they're taking away whatever profits we may have been making. So there's been this call, especially with the drop in oil prices, let's diversify from gas. I mean, everybody knows that Trinidad and Tobago has been an oil-based country, but we need to diversify from gas. What do you think about that, and how do you think that we can make that possible if it should be? How do you think
the first point I want to make is that we can be competitive still in the oil and gas industry. Yes, we have a lot more competition, but as long as we are competitive in what we do, so that's about getting all of our productivity levels up high. Productivity in Trinidad has been falling, so we have to get all that industrial relations stuff right, because if we don't, then we're never going to be productive, we can never be competitive. So whatever industry we go into, if you're not competitive, then you have nothing to sell. So be it agriculture, be it tourism, be it financial services, you have to be competitive if you want to sell things to the global market. So the first thing for diversification is to concentrate on that competitiveness. Can we create competitive companies who can compete internationally? So that is really what the focus has to be. If we are not able to competitively produce food, we're not going to be able to compete with the imported food. If we're not able to have a competitive tourism product which is going to attract people to the country, then people are not going to come. So it has to be about competitiveness. And I think that our focus on diversification has to focus on that thing about being competitive. I think that too often we sort of just have a diversification policy which is about sort of picking sectors. Yeah, and somehow hoping that if you pick a sector, you can somehow make it work. I think that much more important is about overall business environment, and put your focus on creating a really competitive business environment, and then the private sector will find the industries which they can compete in, and they can do business around the world. So that, I think, needs to be the focus. There are, within certain specific sectors, regulation that you can work on and change to make it work better. But I think that needs to be sort of done through a dialogue between the industries and the government, identify what the blockers are, what the barriers are, and then having just a real focus on shifting that red tape which is holding back the industry.
Well, I think one of the major things that you did say was competitiveness, because I think that is something that's really lacking. Tourism, we could take that so far, and I personally don't think that we're competitive enough in tourism. You even mentioned that. We have a product to sell, and we don't market that product. We're not competitive enough. I mean, even just thinking about that. But we are talking energy this morning, and I mean, I do have the farmers, TNT Farmers Union coming up, so that's going to like segue really fantastically into that. What do you see for the future of energy? We just have a little more time left. The future of energy in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I think that we have, you know, as long as we can get this focus into getting upstream investment, there is a long future for our gas industry. Our oil industry also has a very positive future as long as we can get those investment dollars coming in. If we're on business as usual, then we're closing the industry down. That's the choice which the country has to make at the moment. Business as usual means decline. Changing things, making some hard decisions, means that we can sustain the industry. As we're doing that, we then have to think about, we're talking diversification, yes, diversification of the overall economy, but also diversification of our energy mix. So we have to think about our involvement in renewable energy. We have to think about there is going to be a global shift towards solar, towards wind, and we need to start getting working in these areas, get some experience. The big thing we have to do right away is around energy efficiency. We're very inefficient in how we use energy. So if we can change that, and there's some policy things which we can do to change that, then I think that means that we make add more value to the oil and gas that we have because we're more efficient in using it, and then use that strength we have in the industry to diversify within the energy sector.
Thank you so much. And that's some really great ideas, because you talked about solar energy and all those different things, and I definitely think that we need to start looking at those as well.